The Crimson Cravat. Craig Dempson and his crew of 3 crooks crept through acres and acres of farmland crops one humid summer night like a pack of wild, hungry wolves. They traveled to graveyards at the darkest hour when the golden moon was the only light that lit their path, and the North Star the only navigation they needed. Craig and his crew were career criminals. They made a living robbing large graveyard mausoleums of wealthy people. Craig was the mastermind of it all. He took his job very seriously and carried out his work very thoughtfully. First, he'd read obituaries in the newspapers. Then, he'd research the net worth of the dearly departed. He documented the trust funds, inheritances, property ownership, and charitable foundations. He took note of how many family members were left behind. The less family, the better. That means less attention and visitors at the Maslin to suspect any foul play. The time to strike was the night of the entombment. Dressed from head to toe in inconspicuous clothing, and with sacks on their shoulders big enough to hold a 70-pound body, they pried the heavy Maslin stone walls open with toe jacks and clamps. Once inside, they'd slide the flat, rectangular tombstone covers aside with their own human strength, and then, with crowbars, popped the coffins open like a cork out of a bottle. They snatched all kinds of treasures like heirloom diamond necklaces, emerald headdresses, embroidered crystal gowns, and bags of gold bars and coins. Craig would go to extreme lengths if necessary to steal valuables. There was the time he used a utility knife to slice off 5 fingers from a dead woman because he couldn't slip off her gemstone rings. There was also the time he used pliers to pull out a dead man's top row of teeth because he couldn't remove the gold and the diamond grills that encased them. On this particularly hot and humid night, as his crew members worked tirelessly and silently around him, Craig snatched a fine silk crimson cravat from the suit neck of a dead Creole man that lay before him. It wasn't all that valuable. He just used it to wipe the sweat off his brow before he helped himself to the man's Rolex watch. But before the material could slip from Craig's fingers and reach the marble Maslin floor, the Creole man sat up like a wound-up doll. His head rotated a full 360 degrees right before Craig's eyes. He drew his jaws wide open and began to croon with a crazed, "Ah!" The Maslin walls began to rumble. The ceiling began to shake. The thieves shielded their heads from falling concrete stones. The longer the Creole man crooned, the more the walls cracked like growing angry spiders. The ground trembled like the dead knew what was going on. The stone walls finally gave out and crashed into a smoky heap to the ground. The next morning, the criminals' bodies were discovered by the groundskeeper. They were bloody, black and blue. Each crew member had limbs missing. Craig had all of his, but there was no sign of his head. The Creole man lay there in his open coffin without a crumb of dirt or dust. He was in the same exact position he had been upon burial, but this time, in his stiff cold hand, he clutched his fine silk crimson cravat.